Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Forage Analysis webinar, and we will begin momentarily. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Mickelson with S&W Seed Company, and on behalf of the NIRS Consortium, I'd like to thank you for registering and welcome you to the first in our series of 4 educational webinars on forage quality, NIR, and our consortium. You will be in listen-only mode, but we will take questions. If you would type your questions using the question function, we will hold questions until the end so we can keep to our 30-minute presentation schedule. ARPAS members may get 2 CEUs for the 4-part NIRS Consortium Forage Analysis Series and can report their CEUs under NIRSC 2020 Live Webinar Series at ARPAS. At this time, I will turn it over to our first presenter in this series, Dennis Walker from the Noble Research Institute in Ardmore, Oklahoma, who will be presenting on the importance of forage analysis. Dennis is the facility manager at Noble's Forage Analysis Lab. Welcome, Dennis.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. It's a pleasure to be with each and every one of you this afternoon. I've been with the Noble Foundation, Noble Research Institution, for about 21 years and part of the consortium for probably at least 18 years. So this has been a great organization for me, and very passionate about forage testing, and operating the Forage Analysis Lab has truly been a good career path for me, and look forward to sharing some things that we've done and that we've done as a consortium. So here's an outline of what we're going to try to cover today. Number one, the importance of forage analysis. We'll be looking at the variability of forages, and within that, the variability from species to species differences, and then the differences within species, and the environmental effect of quality within the species. And then we're going to look at the end user goals, how people out in the industry use these forage quality parameters, the numbers, in what they're providing for either the animal nutritionists, the livestock producers, plant breeders, researchers. There's a number of people that use these numbers on a day-to-day basis. So within the variability of forages, we're going to look at the differences within alfalfa, comparing alfalfa to Bermuda grass, to tall fescue, the clovers. And what I want you to recognize here, that the alfalfa was taken at bud stage, and the grasses are at boot stage. So they are harvested at the same stage of maturity, but even within that same stage, you're seeing within crude protein, for example, the small grains, anywhere from 8 to 16. Alfalfa at that boot stage can be 22 to 26. Bermuda grass from 7 to 16. And within the acid detergent fiber, a good range of values at that same stage. In the neutral detergent fiber, large differences. And that translates for the TDN, a lot of variability, and with the relative feed value, relative feed quality that we'll look at, you get a lot of variation. And the point here is that you have to test to really know what you have. You can assume that you're going to have a value around this number if I harvest at boot stage or at bud stage for legumes. but that can be a dangerous assumption. We'll look at some numbers and some examples of why that can cost you money and cost you productivity with your livestock. So we look at variability of forages, and there's a lot of people that take great pride in looking at hay and getting relatively close on what those numbers would be, where they feel like they are. So which lot of hay is the better one? Can we tell by just looking? Lot 1 or lot 2? Well, honestly, I would say lot 1 has a little greener tint to it. If you were smelling it, it might even smell better. And so a lot of people, I would say that lot 1 is quite a bit better than lot 2. Maybe lot 2 looks like it's just a much lower quality forage. But if we look at the actual testing of it, the relative feed quality is 178 for lot 1, and the relative feed quality is 182 for lot 2. So the higher the number, the higher the quality. The crude protein, there's not much significant differences between the two, and the total digestible nutrients are pretty much equal too. So just by looking, we're not going to truly know what these values are. And as I said, that can translate into lost productivity or lost profitability. So if we look at the environmental factors that affect forage quality, plant maturity plays a tremendous role in the decrease in forage quality. So as a plant matures, we get an increase in fiber because we get an increase in stem as the plant grows. The amount of leaves, which are typically better in quality, more digestible, decreases in relationship to the stems. Crude protein will decrease as the plant matures, and because we're laying down more fiber with the stems, higher fiber content, we have a higher nutrient fiber and acid detergent fiber, which affects the intake of the forage from the animal. As the fiber content increases, intake decreases, and the rate of passage through the animal decreases. And so it stays in the rumen longer, and overall average daily gains will decrease with plant maturity. So as you harvest to increase your yield, you are giving up quality, which can at some point decrease your productivity, even though you may be harvesting more on your acreage. It may not be worth it from a quality standpoint. So other factors, fertilization. Proper fertilization can increase crude protein. We see that especially in the warm season grasses. Bermuda grass responds well to nitrogen, not only in growth, but increase in crude protein. And we can see a small decrease in the acid ADF and NDF. Now, there's a downside to that. Too much N can result in high nitrate in forages, which you can get nitrate toxicity, especially in some of the sorghum grasses, and even in a number of warm season grasses. So we have to be careful. We have to be mindful of that we're not over fertilizing through the recommended amount that we get from our soil tests in hopes of really increasing our forage quality. It can have a negative impact. And as I mentioned, the leaf to stem ratio, we get a increase in protein and decrease in fiber content of the forage when the forage is at a leafy or growth stage. And so as I mentioned earlier, as the plant matures, that ratio decreases. You get more stems and less leaves, and the overall quality will decrease. And we see that weeds can have a negative impact on the forages. Typically, weeds are higher fiber plants, and the weeds will decrease forage quality. And there's also the possibility that there can be some palatability issues with some of the weeds, and they can affect especially milk quality and such things of that nature. So weather patterns, drought, humidity, flooding, cool temperatures, they can affect the forage quality from a regional standpoint, but even in your own area, the short-term weather differences can affect the quality of that particular cutting. So it's important to not just know what your weather patterns are, but know that it affects the quality, and that to truly know what you have, forage testing, sampling your harvest is very important. So baling conditions, rained on hay or hay baled under moist conditions loses the water soluble carbohydrates and decreases forage quality. As the bales are rained on, you get a leaching of the soluble sugars, and there's other issues that we see when the hay is not properly stored. So when you bale it is important, avoiding it getting rained on, and then properly storing it so that you don't get a loss of hay quality as it's being stored. So we're going to look at the end users and how important these numbers are to our producers and our animal nutritionists. So the animal nutritionists will use the constituents, so crude protein, NDF, ADF, mineral contents, etc., in balancing a ration balancing software. So it is tempting, very tempting, to take a number from a chart for that particular forage and know that it was harvested at this particular growth stage and use that number to develop a ration instead of sending the forage off for actual testing. And we saw earlier that you cannot always know what that number is, because even harvested at that same stage, you can have a variety, a wide range of numbers. So by forage testing and knowing what our actual forage value is, we can reduce the under supplementation of livestock. So if we know that if we're not supplementing enough, this would occur when we overestimate the nutrient value of the forages. And we know that by not meeting their nutritional needs, we're going to have a negative impact on the animal health. This decreases production potential. We see a reduced reproductive metrics, and we'll see a reduced milk production and reduced growth, average daily gain of the animals if we're in the beef market. So we can lose quite a bit of money by under supplementing the livestock, and that would be a result of giving our forage too high of a number. So what happens if we underestimate the nutrient value of the forages? Well, that means we're going to be adding too much supplementation, and we know that feed supplement is expensive as we mix it with our forages. So we're going to be overfeeding the animals, and that will also have a negative impact on production and negative impact on reproduction if the animal has been fed too much. And the economic losses for the extra cost of supplementation that will add up in a hurry. And really, by spending the time and effort and the money to forage test has the potential of saving you in the long run a lot of issues and costs associated with your feeding costs, but also with your overall animal health. So that's a very important thing to remember. So we have plant breeders in industry. We have plant breeders at the Noble Research Institute, many universities, and we look to develop new genetic products. We use NIR for a quick analysis to rank the annual forage samples. So over the course of a growing season, multiple harvests are taken. Many parameters are looked at when the decisions are to be made. There's a very quick turnaround that needs to be done. So the quick analysis of the NIRS is very important. So we have plots all over the United States, and the NIRSC calibration can standardize the analysis and compile it into one database. So we know that samples that's harvested in one area of the state, if it's in the northern area, is going to respond different than the southern part of the state or in different states. And so by having that variation of different regions, different varieties, different growth stages built into our calibration, we have a robust equation that accounts for these variations, and we can analyze those samples quickly and not have to worry about adding new samples or outliers to our equations, because the consortium in their database management takes care of that. And I believe one of our webinars will talk more about how these equations are developed, but it adds a degree of robustness that's very important when you're collecting samples across multiple locations. So our researchers, they have similar goals as what the plant breeders have. They want it to be cost effective. They need a rapid turnaround time. Studies are typically yearly. And so decisions that come from the harvest and the quality analysis that's collected this year will be very important as the next year's planting season comes about. And so there is a very short turnaround. If we're looking at the difference in getting results from NIR versus wet chemistry, there's really no comparison, especially if you have your own instrumentation at your facility. You can get results in a day what would take a week if you run all the parameters that we typically look at. So if we look at the multiple layers of the forage quality of the research that can be done quickly and cost effective, we're looking at crude protein, NDF, ADF, in vitro VTDMD, the DNDF, the macro minerals. These are all built into our equation. So when you scan that sample, you get all these different results at that same time. And to run all these parameters for a lab wet chemistry is expensive with the labor, the chemical cost, and the time restraints. Makes it almost cost prohibitive and time prohibitive if you're running a large research program. I probably flew through this, but we wanted to allow extra time for questions. If you want to be a part of the consortium, whether you're a university or a private organization that is looking to buy an instrument and get prediction models, prediction equations, contact Patty. She is our executive director, and you can see her web or her email address and her phone number. I'll leave that up just for a moment so you can get that information.
Thank you, Dennis. If there are any questions for Dennis, you can type them into the questions panel. Dennis, you had a long list of forage species at the beginning of the presentation. What can you tell us? What are across the U.S., what are the most common forages in livestock production today?
Dave, I'm really more familiar with what's in the southern U.S., southeast, but I know in general alfalfa, as far as a legume, has tremendous amount of acreage, very important. In our area, small grains is planted, and it is grazed through the fall and winter, and then they'll pull it off before it's needed to allow it to mature for grain harvest. Ryegrass, very important around here. Up in your area, corn silage is used a lot. Our base crop here, and in a lot of the South, is Bermuda grass. We have a lot of tall fescue in the Southeast area. Orchard grass is very important. And there's a number of producers that likes to introduce legumes. So we have red clover, we have white clover, we have a large number of variety of clovers. My advice would be to look at what is adapted to your area, talk with your extension service or your university connections that you may have, your forage specialists in your area, and use what is most adapted to your area. There's a lot of options, but the most important thing is make sure that it grows well and is productive for you in your region.
Okay, and being that there's so many different forages in different areas of the company, and actually forage combinations of legumes and grasses, can you just briefly talk again about why you shouldn't take just the average values for those forages and combine them to use?
Well, that would be very nice if there was an average value. Unfortunately, to get an average value, you have to have low values, you don't have high values. And so by having the average value, you really don't have the true value of what is represented in that bale of hay. And so by truly sampling that, sending it off for analysis, you will get an average value through the multiple samplings of that bale, and then across the areas of your field. So it is important not just to rely on book values or average values that you may have gotten last time, but truly know what you have at that point in time with that particular bale or sample.
Okay, and is that kind of leads into why you use samples from all over the U.S. in your calibrations?
The reason we use samples across the U.S. is that the way the consortium builds their prediction models, they use a principal component analysis, PCA. And what that does, it takes out the variability or accounts for the variability of the forages across the region, across growth stages, across different species. And so each thing that I just listed is just, for lack of a better term, something that we put in the basket. So anything that adds variability, we put in the basket, we can model for. So we have labs that receive samples across the United States. If you get a sample from an area that's not in your region, it's going to be a lot different. And if you only have an equation that is built for your area, then that sample that you get in from somewhere else would be an outlier, and you would not have confidence in the prediction. So by adding samples across the U.S., different growth stages, different stages of maturity, different growing conditions, we add that robustness. And so as we get samples in, we have confidence that we can not only predict that, but if across the US, if we are all using the same data set prediction model, everybody within the consortium should be getting similar values to report to their customers. So that probably the long answer for you, but we really need that variability, and having multiple partners across the US that's part of the consortium, we truly do have one of the most robust prediction models that I know of. And you can have confidence, no matter where you get these samples in from, that you can properly predict them and give good sound results.
Okay, and if we're talking about hay bales, baled hay, is there a best particle size? I know that in different machines there's small cup and large cup. Is there a certain best sampling or particle size or sampling procedure?
What are you talking about? If
If
you're the
somebody's sending
operator,
in a sample from a bale of hay.
well, what we recommend is that you get a probe and you probe the hay bale properly, depending on if it's a round bale or a square bale, depends on where you penetrate the bale. As far as a particle size, I would suspect, most of the hay probes are inch and a half in diameter. But as far as sending in your sample, you don't want to send in too large of a sample.
Okay.
You want to adequately sample, but you don't want to send it into the lab, just large amounts. I'm not exactly sure if I answered the question or not.
And then once you get the sample, you dry it and grind it to a particular.
Yes. The lab would dry it to certain percent dry matter.
And that's
less.
pretty standard among labs.
Yeah, yes, it is. We have standard operating procedures, and they will typically grind it through a 1 millimeter Wiley mill, which is a blade cut, and then we will do a second grind through a UD mill, which gets a fine particle size and gives us the uniformity in particle size, and that would be put into the ring cup for analysis. And we have training for the operators on best management practices of dividing samples, making sure you're properly splitting samples if you have a larger sample, drying the sample, grinding the sample, handling the sample, and reporting the results on a dry matter basis, and making sure that the instrument is operating properly. So there's a lot of checks that we have in place that's very beneficial for being part of the consortium.
Okay, and one final question, and we may address this further in our series, but how much variability can we expect between labs and within labs for NIR results from a given sample?
Oh, I don't want to get too much into that. I know our presenters will do a great job showing that, but over the last few years, we've had a really significant improvement on the manufacturing of the instruments and the software that runs the instruments, and the matching, make sure the instruments are matching properly, that the wavelengths are all corresponding and matching up correctly. And so by having that variability, that not have to worry about that, and we've concentrated on cleaning up our database and really building the most as good of equations that we've had. We've really tightened up our variability from lab to lab to lab, and that's showing in the.
And I think this will be addressed in our third webinar with Utam Saha from University of Georgia. So
Yeah,
stay tuned for more on this.
Yeah, all the labs are certified with NFTA, and so our grades have improved significantly over the years, our performance, and so we feel very confident that we have really accurate results, and they're very repeatable too.
Okay. Well, very good. So I'm seeing no further questions. And if not, this will conclude today's session. And I'd like to thank Dennis for presenting today, and thank all our attendees for joining us, and hope you'll join us for the future sessions. So thank you all.
So it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Dave, for hosting this.